Welcome to the program. I have a true crime story for you tonight that might have 50 million suspects. And I'm not kidding. Who among us hasn't been denied health care? You get that notice back in the mail and you cannot believe you paid for insurance and yet they won't cover you. It makes us mad. I know you've had it happen. But today something happened to a person at the very top of a company like that. And now 50 million customers of that company are wondering, could it have been me? Could I have been that mad? Could it be someone who did get mad? Could it have been someone else? Today you heard the news about this, an assassin going after that man in the blue jacket, shooting him in the back, New York City street, and then calmly walking away. But what you do not see necessarily in this video or in the chain that happened afterwards are the clues that we've assembled tonight. Today it was news all day. Tonight it is a murder mystery and a man on the run, a manhunt. The hooded man, the mysterious man in the backpack. There are dozens and dozens of clues, and we have put together an investigative team and lined up all the clues for you in this special report tonight. Like I said, today it was news. Tonight it is the murder mystery with all of the forensic pieces of the puzzle. Clue by clue. And you may be surprised at how much the news actually missed today. Starting with the gun. That gun, there is so much more to it than just meets the eye in that picture. The bullets left behind, casings left behind. The backpack, the outfit. These are expensive, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. This may not be just some killer. This may be a pro, but what are the tells in the way he shot that suggest that was no pro at all? Tonight we also have exclusive video that came in just for this program because a producer of ours lives right there. And she was there just after it happened. So we've assembled some pretty good stuff. The other thing is, maybe not everyone's talking about this, but there are tens of thousands of cameras all over New York City. There is a popcorn trail that doesn't just stop in Central Park, where this guy took a city bike. We think it's a city bike. That's what much of the reporting is, right? You have to swipe to get a city bike. They have GPS locators on city bikes. They have docking information on city bikes. And when you remove them from the dock, that's also electronic. There is a popcorn trail in every digital respect. Not only that, surveillance cameras aren't just taking pictures anymore. Sometimes they're loaded with even extra technology, like facial recognition. Yeah, the guy had a scarf over his nose, but that doesn't mean his eyes were covered. We're going to get into all of that as well. So the gun, how about the swagger, the way he walked, the gait? Those are all clues to a crime. Those are all things that have caught perpetrators before. And there is a cornucopia of these clues tonight. Literally hundreds of them. Then there's the legal trouble. The CEO had legal trouble of his own. We're going to go into some of the investigations he was under, his colleagues were under. There's a whole new array of potential suspects. And not only that, the fact that he had faced threats before. All of this is coming your way. Like I said, today it was the news. Tonight we have the puzzle, the investigative forensic puzzle. The gunman was brazen. The victim was targeted. The killing was premeditated. And those are not my words. They are straight from the NYPD. Now, here are my words, and you can quote me on this. What you're going to hear on this program tonight, the clues and details and breadcrumbs from this morning's shocking murder of an insurance executive named Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan, those things are what is going to bring his killer to justice. That killer has been on the loose now, or on the run, or maybe just lying low, for just over 15 hours. And by now you've probably seen the graphic surveillance footage that was taken outside the New York Hilton Hotel in Midtown Manhattan. It was the site of United Health Group's annual investor conference. And there's Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare, a subsidiary, on his way to the conference. Here's how the mystery began. On a New York City sidewalk, 6:45 this morning. The shooter in a black hoodie, expensive black hoodie, black pants, and carrying a distinctive gray backpack, an expensive gray backpack, walks up behind Thompson as his target approaches. Ignoring everybody else on that New York City sidewalk, he opens fire just on Thompson. And a doorman runs for his life. Before we get to all the forensic clues that we've lined up for you tonight, clues that detectives will certainly be piecing together as we speak in war rooms to hunt down this killer, I want to check in with our correspondent, Caitlin Becker, who is live outside on the scene just blocks away from tonight's famous Rockefeller Center Christmas tree lighting. And Caitlin, it couldn't come at a worse time just in terms of the number of people who are in Manhattan this morning, this afternoon, and tonight.
I can't stress to viewers, Ashleigh, how right you are there with the volume of tourists who are in New York today, especially in this area. I mean, we looked at hotel rooms in the Hilton right behind me. They were something like $1,000 a night right now. It is packed here. So for this to have gone down at 6:46 in the morning in broad daylight when workers were on their way and commuting, it happened right behind me. You see this, you wouldn't know, Ashleigh. You really would not know that the surveillance video you just showed happened right here at this busy hotel entrance. There are very visible security cameras all over the place. Those doors are right where he was approached. The shots ran out. And then right where it hits that wall over there, that is where Thompson ultimately collapsed. For roughly 12 hours today, this area was an active crime scene, and it took that long for investigators to process everything. You mentioned a popcorn trail of evidence. There were a ton of evidence markers outside here today where they were getting forensic evidence, things like shell casings, and collecting all of that. Not only that, but there's a luxury hotel just diagonal here, and I'm hearing that perhaps that's where Thompson was staying. So it looks like he didn't seem to be walking all that far. And then after the shooting, the killer booked it right past where I'm standing down this breezeway. And again, I'm looking around. There are cameras everywhere. And I question whether or not, like you said earlier, this could be a contract killing, because the confidence of the shooter in that video is something I don't think I've ever seen before, Ashleigh.
Well, you're speaking my language right now, Caitlin Becker, because that is the first thing I thought of when I watched how this thing played out. Was that a contract killing? But I've got the experts lined up. Caitlin, don't go anywhere. I'm going to actually come back to you for continued coverage. I need you to bring us the latest, because I know that news has been breaking. You know, every 5-10 minutes there seems to be an update. So Caitlin Becker's going to stand by for us. I just want to say that after doing what this guy came to do, it was bizarre. He just walked away. Calm, cool, collected, slow. Just walked away. And then he ducked down a side street into an alley and then another side street before getting on what's called, we think, the city bike. That's a famous thing in New York. You can just grab them, pay for them, and ride them anywhere and put them back in a dock. We think he might have been on a city bike. Went down 6th Avenue and rode right into Central Park. I'm going to take you through this map, okay? I'm going to start down at the location. For location 1, that's the location where the victim exited his hotel and walked across the street towards the New York Hilton Hotel where that conference was located, okay? He exits the hotel. Then location 2 is where the shooter opened fire. Location 3 is where the shooter ran into that alley we were talking about. That's between 54th and 55th Streets in Manhattan. And then the shooter made his way to location 4 on 6th Avenue, where apparently he gets that bike, possibly out of the dock at that point if he hadn't already got it at the ready. Location 5 shows where he rides right towards Central Park, and then that top one, location 6, he enters Central Park and presumably at this point disappears, but I doubt that highly. Nobody really disappears in Manhattan. That's real hard to do. And as careful, or even as professional as he might have been, he did leave a trail. He left a trail from the location tracker on that possible city bike to the ubiquitous video surveillance that almost literally blankets every spot in New York City. By one estimate, folks, if you've been to New York City, this might not surprise you. Just take a look at these pictures. There are somewhere around 15,000 police cameras alone littered all the way through those buildings, all up and down those little narrow streets, north and south. 15,000. That's not the only cameras, though. Of course, there are cameras at Starbucks stores, right? And this camera at a Starbucks caught the gunman right before the shooting. Guess he stopped for coffee. Cameras also captured the killer on his phone walking down the street. That's also before the killing. There's also physical evidence, including 3 live rounds that were found at the murder scene and 3 spent casings. 3 live rounds and 3 casings. That's a bonanza, folks, as is a cell phone that was found nearby. These are exclusive pictures. I want to make sure you tune your attention. You've not seen these ones before. These came to us from our producer who lives right in this area. The photos, investigators are putting the tags down, right? They're placing those tags right down there. Those little tags, we like to call them little tents. They've got numbers on them usually. And they mark each place where they can find evidence. And then they photograph those places and they mark them for a hopeful prosecution in the future. But there they are, getting up close and personal. Look at that guy crouching right over the number 1 tent. It's amazing stuff. Okay, so then there's the victim himself, all right? There is the victim himself and the business that he led. United Healthcare has more than 50 million card-holding members. I'm one of them. There's 250,000 employees, 250,000 employees. This man's wife told NBC that he'd, quote, received threats, but she didn't know who they were from or what they were about. But she did say they were, quote, possibly from people with lack of coverage. Maybe that's a reference to his work with United Health Insurance. Maybe it's that reference I was talking to, 50 million possible suspects. So many of us have had denied, and it makes people angry. Before I go any further, I want to bring in Scott Rouse, who trained alongside the FBI, the Secret Service, and the U.S. military intelligence, and has specific expertise as to that shooter's behavior and body language during this murder. Scott co-hosts a podcast called The Behavior Panel. I'm also pleased to welcome my expert-in-chief on firearms, Steve Wolf, who noticed some very peculiar details about the shooter's style as well as his weapon. So I'm going to go over all of that. And Scott, I'd like to begin with you. Your take on that video, specifically whether you thought this might be a professional hit or whether this might have just been a disgruntled either co-employee, fired employee, someone who didn't have insurance, or maybe some other disgruntled reason.
I think Steve and I may see this the same way. I think he'll see this as a gun enthusiast who is, for whatever reason, it looks to me like he's angry. There are several reasons he looks that way to me. But this doesn't look like a professional killing at all to me, not even a little bit. It looks like somebody who's angry and who is used to being around guns at a range, that style of shooting. So from the way he shoots to the distance he shoots the victim, this all says amateur on it. There are a couple of different ways you stand when you shoot. I'm sure Steve will cover this. I'll just touch on them. And there's the one he's in is like an isosceles stance and he's behind him. If you're a real professional, you don't do it there. You walk up and you get him in the head, and that's about it. Or you can get him 2 in the chest and 1 in the head. And that's another one that the gangsters used to do all the time. And you probably wouldn't use a gun like a 9mm, something that would leave the shells behind. You'd use a 38 or 22 or something like that. And one of the things that really tipped me off as to this is not a professional also is the way when he shoots the gun, and when you shoot a gun and you cycle it, and whatever the suppressor is on there, people will see that as a silencer, but it's really a suppressor because it suppresses the sound. And he's racking or cycling the gun as he does that. And when he does, he's doing it sideways and he's pulling on it like this. That's amateur hour. 90% of people who've shot for years, you'll hold it up here and do this, and you'll keep it close to you because you have to go, you may have to shoot again from there if something's going on. So there's so many things in here. I'm afraid I'm going to step on Steve, but I'm sure he's got 90 million things as well. And one of the other things that bothered me about this...
You know what? Yeah, say that real quick, because I want to get to that suppressor versus silencer, too, because I could see that was not a normal gun. But go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay. When as the gun, it actually does, I think, jam on him one time there, and that's when the gun is open. And when I'll use this one to give you an example. Because when the gun jams, it usually ends up like this, and this is open. And as he's trying to clear it, he's using his hand like this as he hits it, and it's almost like he's afraid it's going to hurt him. Usually what happens in a case like that is the shell will come up and it'll get stuck in there. And there's a way to go about doing that really quickly, and then you pop it back and you're ready to go again. But everything about this screams amateur to me. Everything about it screams amateur.
So, okay, Yeah, and you know what, Steve? I want you to come in and weigh in on two things that Scott just touched on, and I want you to dig deeper. Number one is that jamming and why a gun might have jammed 3 times and needed to be hit like that. And number two, I thought it was a silencer, and you've disabused me of that. What is the difference of a silencer and a suppressor? And would that have meant none of us could hear all this?
A silencer is just the civilian word for suppressor. That's what they call it in the movies, but technically it's a suppressor because it changes the sound. It doesn't make it silent.
So what about the jamming? And we'll run some of the video again.
So we don't really know.
That shows him hitting.
I'm not sure that the gun is actually jamming so much as failure to feed. So they're different. And what Scott was showing was called a stovetop jam. But essentially, in order for the ammo to get from here to here, which is where it fires, so normally the bullet is sitting, right here. When the gun goes off, as the bullet goes out the front, the casing exerts force against the back, and that cycles the gun. So in a proper cycling, that goes all the way back and then comes forward. And then when it comes back again, it ejects around and then it comes forward. But if you're using subsonic ammo, which is ammo that has a velocity of less than 1,100 feet per second, because you want it to be very quiet, it sometimes is underpowered. And so the slide will come back a little bit, but not far enough to eject that casing and not far enough to load the next round. It'll go back partly, and because now you just have a spent casing in there, you would manually have to throw that spent casing out in order to get the next one in. So he could be having that short cycling because of a lack of powder in the subsonic ammo, or if you saw in his stance, which was a reverse Weaver stance, where he had his shooting foot forward. Typically, you would have your shooting foot back. He's got his feet, there you go. So he's got a proper footwork there, but you look, his left leg is up on its side. So I'm right on there with Scott. You would have optimal positioning if you were a professional, not alternating your feet forward and backwards between your shots. And you would have tested this gun to make sure that it cycles properly with the ammo. It seems like he anticipated that the gun might not cycle, so he may have practiced with that subsonic ammo. And I also agree with Scott on the distance issue. That's a lot of distance unnecessarily placed between himself and the subject. I got two more questions. Yeah. I have 2 more questions and not enough time. So first one goes to you, Steve, and that is that when he's popping out the ejected casings, they're still scattered on the sidewalk and 3 live rounds. Can you explain that and how that could be really beneficial to the investigators? Well, the gun can leave marks on the casings, and then those can help track that to the gun. It leaves marks on the casings, and the firing pin also leaves a mark on the primer, which is also unique to each gun. So those things could be used to help trace the gun if they locate it. The other thing that can inhibit the cycling of the gun is that if you don't hold the gun firmly, and so typically you would want this arm straight so that you're able to keep the gun frame in place so that the slide can go all the way back. But you'll see in that video, he's got his shooting arm cocked and his support arm straight, which is also backwards. And that will also lead to a short cycling of the gun.
Not a super pro. Okay, just a couple seconds left. But Scott, the way he exited, he walked quietly. He was never nervous. He wasn't jumpy. He did his shooting. He walked right up to the victim, shot again, sauntered off quietly into the streets of Manhattan. What does that tell you, and what does that do for cops who are investigating?
That looks to me like it's an adrenaline dump he's had, because he's building up to this. He's been waiting for it. He's been in the coffee shop. He's been staying around. No telling how long he's been waiting. So he does the shooting, and when he's finished, all that anger and everything up that he's got locked inside is sort of released. And that adrenaline, after that big dump of adrenaline, then he starts to relax, but he's just angry as he leaves. That's why we see that waddle as he's going away. Because you'll notice he walks almost normally at the top. He doesn't walk at the gait of a military person or a police officer. But then he gets that waddle as he's paying attention to the gun because he's trying to keep his balance. He's not used to doing things like this. He's not a proficient gun handler. So I think that's an adrenaline dump. And after that, you're sort of worn out. And with all the anger and all that, I think that's what we're seeing him experience there. That's why the slow walk.
And just real quick about the gait, because so often I've seen killers caught by the way they walk. Do you see anything specific here?
Yes, this is really important, and the police are going to be watching this like a hawk. His gait changes as he goes. If you're in the military, if you're in the police, something like that, there's a specific gait that you walk at because you practice marching around all the time, especially in the military. Now, in this guy's gait, see how it starts right there? His left leg is forward and his other leg is back because he's still walking forward to shoot, like Steve was explaining earlier. Then he starts straightening up as he tries to get that get it re-racked or get his barrel cleared, in other words, and then he starts waddling. And then he goes to normal as he walks away. There's the adrenaline dump right in there, and now he's going to slowly get back to normal as he starts. There it goes. Yeah, it's going to be more when he gets across the street because he's trying to get his stuff back together. He's got to put the gun away. He's got to get his backpack ready. He's got to get ready to change clothes, do whatever he's going to do, and for whatever he's going to use that backpack for.
All that's coming in just a moment. I'm not leaving out that clue that you just mentioned, the backpack. I noticed it was bulging, so that story is coming up. But I have to say, Scott Rouse and Steve Wolf, so informative and so helpful and so much deeper than so many of the headlines that we heard all day long. I mean, this is where the story is going, is this deep forensic dive into every single detail that these videos and whatever's left on the street has shown. Thank you to both of you. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ashleigh.
Melting into a city of 8 million people, that really used to be easy, but now it's still possible. It is just not easy. When we come back, the killer's hoodie, his trendy, expensive backpack, the e-bike that he enlisted to ride away. They may just look like details to you, but to the forensic eye, they are a gold mine. And we've got even more on the list. All of it next. We're searching for a killer tonight, and make no mistake, there are so many clues that he may not even realize he left behind. The killer is a hoodie-wearing gunman who shot dead the CEO of United Healthcare early this morning, right outside the New York Hilton in Midtown. The clues are out there, thanks in large part to a virtual blanket of surveillance cameras. The NYPD makes use of more than 15,000 cameras in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Brooklyn, and has facial recognition software to put names to faces. That is according to Amnesty International, which is not exactly a fan of the surveillance and the facial recognition tech. But I want you to take a look at this heat map. The public cameras are all in red. Just look at that. Public cameras are all in red. The private cameras that you might see there are in blue. I'm not sure from my monitor. There we go. That's all private cameras. It's even more astounding. And by the way, those technical public cameras see more than just the killer's hoodie, the distinctive backpack, and the money that maybe he may have put into those clothes. He has a two-wheeled getaway vehicle, too. These are all clues that might give him away, but the camera sees something else, too, sees faces. And it has the technology to recognize the faces. I'm joined now by Michael Alcazar. He is a retired NYPD detective and now a professor in the Department of Law, Political Science, and Criminal Justice at John Jay College. And John Muffler is a former assistant chief deputy with the U.S. Marshals Service. He's overseen dozens of manhunts for dangerous offenders. Michael, I'd like to begin with you, if I can, and that extraordinary blanket of public cameras. I get it, the private cameras are there too, they will play in, but the public cameras and the facial recognition technology, can they recognize a face that's covered to here? Because this is what he looked like in the Starbucks. He was covered up to here, and you could just see the eyes. But can there be better technology out there that can see the eyes better and actually get a read on who he is?
Yeah, with facial rec, we could definitely identify facial features, given that if this particular suspect is in a database, like we have photo manager, we have perpetrators we've arrested, and if they're a repeat offender and we use facial recognition, we can definitely identify them, even if it's a partial, of the face. So that's definitely a possibility.
So, John, you brought up something really interesting to one of our producers, and that was that police won't just be looking at the cameras that are trained on wherever he was this morning. They'll be looking at that same location past days and past weeks for scouting. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so this is clearly this is a targeted attack of violence. And so in past public figure attacks, just looking at it in its history, this person didn't come out of thin air. So this is a planned event. So he didn't just show up this morning at 6:46 or whatever time that was. Assassins, and this is what this person is, they do advanced work. They have an advanced plan of escape. So my sense would be, my experience tells me that he had done his homework and he was there before, right? And he knew his escape route, where he was going to go, where he was going to put the bike, get to the bike and take that route into Central Park. And from there, we don't know yet. But my feeling is that he had done advanced planning and advanced practicing. That was part of his attack cycle. It was to get out of that and go on that direction. So
yeah, you know what?
I imagine he
maybe back on the tapes,
practiced
he might not be wearing
looking back in these cameras,
he might not be wearing the face covering, right? Like that's what's fascinating. If you go back days to see if he's done the scouting that you are most assuredly, assuming that he has done, and I don't doubt that. You don't do this without scouting. Maybe he won't have the face covering on. Michael, talk to me about the bulging backpack, because at first I just saw an expensive gray backpack, but then looking closer, it was full to the brim. What does that tell you?
Yeah, maybe part of his planning was like to dip into the park, and then maybe he had a change of clothes. Maybe somebody was meeting him in the park to help him, get away. So, the clothing is important because, as you mentioned, it's expensive. He looks like he's wearing expensive gear. I don't think he bought it just for this assassination. I think this is what he normally wears. And now that we broadcasted his image everywhere, we have Crime Stoppers working and tips are coming in. Somebody's going to recognize him. Somebody's going to recognize his gait, like your other guest mentioned before, his clothing. So that's going to be important clues.
Yeah, and somebody pointed out that this backpack is a $300 backpack. John, does that tell you that this is a rich guy? Does it tell you it's a hitman? Does it tell you it's a disgruntled employee? Does it tell you it's another executive who maybe doesn't want to be named in the investigations that they're under, which I'll get into in a little bit in the show?
Yeah, I think what the backpack tells me, the color of it is distinctive. It is obviously expensive. He's wearing a black jacket and hoodie, but the combination of the two different colors makes it easier looking at camera images to identify a person in two-tone. So again, I agree with your past guest, not a professional, but certainly somebody that I think NYPD, as they're sifting through the thousands of camera views, that's a baseline change in imaging, and I think that's definitely a mistake that he made in the two-tone colors with the jacket and the backpack there.
So recognizable. All right, something else I want to bring up, and I'm going to give this one to you, Michael. I'm going to start with something we found online. It was a sleuth online who actually posted a map and said that he had tracked all of the city bike data. I don't know that that's possible, but it is possible. I'm just going to bring it up because it's something I think the police might be looking into. But he believes that the killer, if this is the killer and if it is a city bike that he grabbed, this is what the person named Riley writes. Bike number 421-6511 left the dock at 54th Street and 6th Avenue at 6:44 a.m. and was docked at 6:52 a.m. at Madison Avenue and 82nd Street. That's way up on the Upper East Side. He continues to say, this is the only bike that left within 10 minutes of the shooting and headed northbound. So,
that's great.
Michael, is that information that the police already know, already have, saw what we saw, and have already tracked it down?
Yeah, I'm confident if this online sleuth figured this out, our NYPD computer crimes have already done that. So there's GPS, hopefully, on the e-bikes, and they've already mapped out all the bikes that were in the area, in the vicinity, that traveled in the direction of this suspect's flight. So, yeah, it's good work if it's correct, and I'm sure our detectives have already done that.
And Riley says that he's spoken to police as well, but I'll be fascinated to see if that goes anywhere. Real quick, John, I'm out of time. I literally have 10 seconds left, but the cars and taxis on the road today, so many of them are outfitted with forward-facing cameras. And if this guy was on a bike in New York City, he passed by a lot of cars. Do they need to put out an APB for the public to turn your video in if you were driving on those streets at that time? Because maybe that caught a good look at the guy's eyes or his face.
100%. And that's a great PSA for you all to put out, because somewhere that image is captured on somebody's camera, whether it's a cell phone or a vehicle camera. And again, and now that you know, just to say that was the truth in that sleuth's investigation, they know where to look, right? So if you're driving in that area and have a camera on your car, obviously contact NYPD, because you may have something there.
Yeah. I mean, taxis, New York City taxis, Ubers, Lyft rides, ride-share companies, and then just the average. I have one on my car. I have a forward-facing camera. Everything that's within, about 180 degrees of me gets captured no matter where I am when the car is driving. To the both of you, I'm so thankful for your expertise. John Muffler and Michael Alcazar, thank you so much tonight.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because we've got more of the forensic breakdown on this assassin who murdered an executive in cold blood on the streets of New York City. Believe it or not, the victim himself was being investigated. Did that play any part? Did the red flags at the Justice Department play some part in the death of Brian Thompson? We're going to take you in there next. It has been breaking news all day, but tonight it is an all-out manhunt. Who is the mysterious hooded assassin that gunned down an insurance executive on a Midtown Manhattan sidewalk at dawn? We've spent much of this hour on what we know and what we can deduce about the killer, but we're also learning more about the victim, Brian Thompson, including accusations of insider trading and a federal antitrust investigation. For more on that side of this investigation, I want to bring in our national correspondent, Caitlin Becker. Okay, so fill me in on that side of the story, Caitlin.
Well, Ashleigh, this takes us back to the end of last year, beginning of this year, where the DOJ probed United Healthcare for an antitrust investigation, accusing them of perhaps creating a monopoly with the healthcare company. And subsequently, after that investigation got underway, and that investigation is still underway, there was a lawsuit that was filed against several United executives. Both, Thompson was not the only one as part of the probe, nor was he the only one as part of this lawsuit. But in the lawsuit, he and multiple other United Health executives are accused of offloading something like 15 million shares of stock before the probe was announced. Of course, once that investigation by the DOJ was announced, the stock then plummeted. So there were some insider trading accusations there as well. So both of those are still actually working their way through the court system. Now, from what we understand, Thompson's wife had been saying that he was getting threats. That is something that is somewhat common for high-powered CEOs. She didn't really go into too much of the details of those threats, but did tell NBC News that he was aware of them and didn't want to change his travel plans to New York, Ashleigh.
So that I'm clear, there's an antitrust probe that's launched, and less than 2 weeks before the probe is announced, this executive sells $15 million worth of shares. And altogether, executives sold a combined $101 million worth of shares. And this is being... if you're an investigator, Caitlin, this is a big part of it. If there's somebody out there who didn't want him to talk in the antitrust investigation, this could have been another reason to either hire a hitman or do it yourself.
This is a huge thing that investigators are going to have to look at, Ashleigh. I mean, as you're going through the show, you're talking about some of the sophistication of the way this was executed. It seems like a kind of a holiday hitman, for lack of a better term. It didn't look to me like a disgruntled person who was denied health care. It looked to me like someone who had the money and the training in order to do this and do this well. You were talking a lot about the manhunt earlier, which is still underway. I talked to the NYPD just before coming on to talk to you. No arrests have been made there yet. And I wanted to just point out, you're talking a lot about the cameras. There are only cameras facing his back, facing the back of both the victim and the perpetrator, and not from the other direction. And I'm curious, of course, I wonder if the shooter knew that already, had staked it out already, and purposely walked in that direction so that the face wasn't shown.
Although, he had to walk in the direction of the victim. Caitlin Becker, great work out there. Thank you so much for this. I appreciate it. And Caitlin's going to stay on that story for us as well as we continue to find leads and clues. Still to come, a legendary detective's dying wish. Lou Smith was one of the first investigators on the JonBenet Ramsey case back in 1996, and the only detective to suggest an intruder was the killer, not JonBenet's parents. Would the killer be locked up tonight if police had only listened to him? We're going to dive into Lou's case files with his best friend and colleague next. 28 years after this country was transfixed by the murder of a tiny little pageant queen, news broke this week that at very long last, police in Boulder, Colorado think an arrest in JonBenet Ramsey's murder might actually be within reach. We're not sure why they suddenly think that, but here's what I wonder. What would have happened if police had just listened to a detective in their ranks named Lou Smith? Might this enduring mystery have been solved years ago? Very early on, while the DA and the police were hyper-focused on JonBenet's parents, John and Patsy, and her 9-year-old brother, Burke Ramsey, Lou Smith had a whole different theory. That on Christmas Day 1996, a would-be kidnapper who slipped into the Ramsey home through a broken window in the basement did all the roaming he needed to do through that house while the family was out for the day. Smith showed anybody who would listen exactly how it could have happened.
It really wasn't that difficult coming in that window. And often, a burglar or an intruder, if they find a safe way in, they also figure it'll be a safe way out. And if you remember, there was a suitcase that was right underneath this window. And if he figures that he has to go out this window, he may think that it would be much easier if there was something to stand on. And on top of the suitcase was a very small, tiny, pea-sized piece of glass, which may have been picked up by a person's shoe, and a faint impression of possibly a footprint on the suitcase.
Unfortunately for everybody, that evidence didn't fit the official theory that someone in the family was the killer, and Smith was ignored, derided, and he even quit the case after 18 months, disgusted and disillusioned. His 2.5-page resignation letter reads in part, "At this point in the investigation, the case tells me that John and Patsy Ramsey did not kill their daughter, that a very dangerous killer is still out there and no one is actively looking for him." But Lou Smith didn't give up, even when he was written off as a, quote, delusional old man. The sad part is he didn't find the killer either. And in 2010, Lou Smith died of colon cancer. His dying wish was for others, his family, his friends, to continue the search for JonBenet's real killer. And one of those friends joins me live now. John Wesley Anderson is also a former colleague of Lou Smith's and author of the book Lou and JonBenet, a legendary lawman's quest to solve a child beauty queen's murder. John, thank you for being on. Why didn't Boulder police see what Lou saw early on?
I think, Ashleigh, that this happens in law enforcement. We get fixated on a certain, suspect or group of suspects. And every time we see new information that comes in, a piece of evidence, we try to force that evidence into the theory instead of the other way around. Try to allow the facts to lead to the theories. We try to let the facts dictate what the theories might be. And I think they were so focused on the Ramsey family as being involved that they just wouldn't look outside. They had blinders on.
What was the last straw for Lou when he just said, "I am out of here," in disgust?
I remember that day very clearly. He showed me the draft letter that he was preparing for his resignation to the DA's office in Boulder, of the Ramsey Task Force. And he really wrestled with that because he knew he was stepping outside. It was going to be much harder for him to solve the case outside than inside the investigation. But the last straw, he told me that I feel that they've impaneled the grand jury for one reason, that's to indict John Bonet's parents, and I can't be a part of that. And that's why he left.
He also, I didn't know this, carried a photo of John Bonet. Did he carry that photo with him till he died?
He did. He carried a photo of all of his victims on cases that he was working, and to include John Bonet's, and it was in his wallet when he went into hospice and passed away.
What about this optimism about 2025 being the year? Do you buy it?
I'm really skeptical. We have seen, because of the Netflix documentary, we have seen more activity coming out of the Boulder Police Department in the last week since the documentary aired than we have in the last decade. But there's so much that they could be doing. And if we look at what they've accomplished in the last 28 years, it's hard to think that they would solve it in the next 24 months or 12 months. That being said, there are more resources out here, and there's definitely patterns, to follow in solving cold cases that are 20, 25, 30 years old, in using advanced technology for the DNA analysis, as well as reaching into familial DNA databases, which, as far as we know, the Boulder Police have been reluctant to do.
John Wesley Anderson, I'm going to have you back because I'm not finished with this story. There's so much more to report, and I really hope that there should be optimism, that there is optimism, that 2025 will be the year. Thanks for being on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's all I have for tonight, but I do want you to stay with us because tomorrow night I'm going to dig into the doorman that was right there when an assassin killed a healthcare executive right in front of him, and he booked it and ran for his life. How much investigative evidence does that doorman have? What kind of questions is he answering tonight? And who is that poor man that lived through all of that? Not only that, the business cameras, and who else may have seen something that's critical? Thanks for being with us tonight. Been really great to have you through this investigation. Stay tuned. Cuomo's next.
All right, Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to News Nation, and thank you for joining us in the fraught fight to be a fair broker. Lord knows we need one, because everyone's doing it again, picking sides, protecting the left, covering for the right, and ignoring what's reasonable. Already, debate about what should be done on the issues that matter that we just elected on, smothered by all party drama all the time, just how they like it. Here's a pro tip. If you are pissed off about scrutiny of both sides, you are the problem. Now, consider the counter. Well, that's false equivalency. Both sides, Cuomo. The other side's worse, and you're making it sound like we're equal.